Hey guys, it's Chris and welcome back to another Star Wars video. Yes, it's been a while since I've done a Star Wars video. If you've been around this channel long enough, you know that I am a Star Wars nerd. It was my first love before we got into Game of Thrones, A Song of Ice and Fire, and all the fantasy stuff. I was a huge sci-fi fan, and Star Wars specifically. First movie I ever saw in the theaters, and so I have some opinions on Obi Wan Kenobi. I finally got caught up watching episode 4, and I have some thoughts before we go into the final 2 episodes. I know there's a lot of controversy surrounding Obi Wan Kenobi. It's got its issues for sure, but it's also not as bad as people are making it out to be. I think you have basically 3 camps. People absolutely hate it. They hate anything Disney Star Wars, which I totally understand to some degree. After all, they did The Last Jedi with Riva Johnson that basically destroyed the franchise. And then you have some people who kind of like it, think it's, nostalgic and all this kind of stuff. And then, of course, you have people who are somewhere in between, and I think that's where I fall, is somewhere in between. Probably leaning towards being very disappointed, but there are some good things about it. But I want to give my honest opinion. I try to approach all these things with common sense and logic, as I always have in all my videos. So I'm not going to sit there and just straight up bash it. But of course, I'm not going to sit here and just praise everything either, because it's Obi Wan Kenobi and Darth Vader and Anakin Skywalker and the whole 9. So, and by the way, before we get started, let me mention we will be doing House of the Dragon. Of course, that is coming up later this year. And all things A Song of Ice and Fire, as far as all those prequels and stuff as well. So be sure to hit that subscribe button if you're interested in that content as well. We'll be starting up the live streams again on Sundays, which will be around 10:30 on Sundays, because that's when the show will air, obviously. And we'll do the post-show live streams like we always have. So I'm really excited to have Westeros come back to the channel, and hopefully we can try to rebuild this channel as we try to get to 100,000 subscribers. So if you can do me a huge favor, click that like button, hit that subscribe button. A lot of people watching the latest videos, especially the House of the Dragon playlist, are not subscribed. So if you could please hit that button, it would really do me a huge favor. It really, really helps a lot. It lets the algorithm know that, hey, people enjoy this content. So hit that subscribe button and let's get started. So first, let's talk about Obi-Wan. And let's jump over here really quick. I just want to quickly, before we jump into the main points here of what I think people are complaining about, let's jump over here to Rotten Tomatoes just to see the updated score. So right now, you have your tomato meter at 88%, and your audience score has now dropped a few points. It was 58%, I believe. Now it's down to 55%. So people are not really enjoying this show. It certainly had high expectations. After all, this is one of the major characters in Star Wars, talking about Obi Wan Kenobi himself. The supposed to be the central character, and of course Anakin Skywalker, otherwise known as Darth fucking Vader. So real quick, just for shits and giggles, let's read a couple of the latest. I won't cherry pick anything here. This is the latest ones on this website here. Now, as you know, typically with modern entertainment, if the audience score, let's go back for a second. Now, of course, you know, with Rotten Tomatoes, typically you have your tomato meter, which are the professional critics. Those are the people who do this professionally. They review movies, whatever, write their columns, etc. Then you have the actual audience score of real people and what they actually think. And of course, anytime something is negative, companies like Disney will always say, well, it's getting review bombed. It's just a bunch of haters and whatever, not taking into account that it actually could be their product. But anyway, so typically when you see this these days with all modern day politics that are, kind of shoved into different stories. And yeah, again, all stories are political in some way, but they have their own politics and their own, their made-up worlds. So typically when you see a high tomato meter and then a low audience score, it's probably bad. On the other hand, when you see a high audience score and a low tomato meter score, it's typically pretty damn good, because the critics are not actually looking for stories and how well they're done and all that stuff these days. They're looking for basically woke points in some cases. I'm not saying everything's like that. I know people do overreach, and that's what I'm going to address in this video as well. So I'm trying to be fair and just be common sense about it. Let's take a look at a couple of latest scores here. Dusty B, 1 star. Kathleen needs to be fired. You have taken such beloved characters and disgraced them with such poor writing. This is not Star Wars. This has nothing to do with the actors. They are all great. I would generally agree with that statement, Dusty B. Kathleen Kennedy has been the worst thing to happen for sure. Although, again, some things have happened under her watch that have been great. Again, The Mandalorian is probably the best example. Ahsoka is going to be outstanding. Rosario Dawson is great as Ahsoka Tano. I really look forward to that series. But I was also looking forward to Obi Wan Kenobi. Next, we have another 1 star, Ryan O. People that don't know Star Wars are in charge of Star Wars. In this case, that is absolutely true because Filoni's not involved with this for some reason. Jon Favreau's not involved with this. I don't know why. Deborah Chow's actually running this show, by the way, and Deborah Chow was really great on Mandalorian. Some of the best episodes of The Mandalorian she directed, but in this case, she's the showrunner directing them all, and she has various writers, and the writers have come out recently too as well. I won't pull up all those articles. You've probably seen all those videos already. They basically admitted they don't know what the hell's going on. The Grand Inquisitor actor said he purposely did not watch the Clone Wars or Rebels. I'm sorry, to purposely avoid somehow trying to be like him, although it's the same character. Recently, a writer on Obi Wan Kenobi came out and said, yeah, what does Obi Wan know about Anakin and Vader? Not realizing that in Revenge of the Sith, he literally saw a hollow recording of Anakin becoming Vader and heard the name. And of course, Yoda basically confirmed that, actually saying that Anakin had become Darth Vader, and they saw it actually happen. I will address that in just a minute as far as, what Riva should have known, how much she should have known, all that good stuff, etc. Because there are expanded universe books that people obviously have not read, like The Dark Lord. There's comics and stuff that, all these things were considered canon, and, they still pull from all these things. So some people are complaining about a lot of things and don't really know themselves, and they claim to be these hardcore Star Wars fans. So I will address that as well, because it does go both ways. Here we go. Anthony B. Here is a 5-star. Anthony B. says, I love the show. How can anyone not like this show is beyond me. Great job, everyone involved. I wish I could give it 10 stars. Okay, so somebody enjoys it, and that's perfectly fine. Here is Malosh S. 2 stars. Ewan McGregor does as well as he possibly could with the script and direction, as he did in 1 through 3. The problem is that absolute last thing anyone asked for was more child actors in this series. They are too young to do a passable job. The combat is terrible, vague choreography, and aliens inexplicably have the voices of cartoon characters instead of doing anything close to the depth of any previous content. Disney's going to drive this franchise into the ground. There you go. So he doesn't quite dig it, I would say. And we'll just do one more for shits and giggles. You got a couple more down here, 3 stars and a 5-star. One more 1-star here. All humiliation that Obi-Wan endured in this TV series, I endured with him. And looks like Disney would prefer to generate fake accounts to bring the score up instead of writing good storylines, which, of course, that actually does happen. But they'll say you're review bombing. They'll say all these are fake. All these people who you could go and look through, and they'll say they're all fake review bombs and stuff. So it's not getting a lot of love, needless to say. So anyway, let's jump into, and I apologize, this is going to be a rather long video, it seems. I don't mean for it to, and it's going to be mildly edited. I'm not going to put in a lot of screenshots and all that kind of stuff. It's just going to be more of a discussion type video. But let's go over I think some of the main points that people have an issue with and talk about it. So first we have Riva, the third sister. I think this is one of the big points. It's not the only point. They're trying to make it out like this is the only thing people are complaining about. It's absolutely not the only thing people are complaining about. There's a lot of things people are complaining about, but I want to touch on Riva, the third sister. Now, she is obviously an Inquisitor. We had never seen the Inquisitor in previous shows. We've just heard the name, but we never got a description or saw her. But she is the third sister, and she is essentially the main antagonist over Vader, and that's where people have a problem. I don't have a problem with Moses Ingram. I think anybody that sends her messages attacking any actor, actress, whatever, because they're simply doing a job they were hired for, I think you're a piece of shit. I mean, I think it's just bullshit. They may not love Star Wars. Maybe they're super huge Star Wars nerds, as some of us are, but they just took a job. They're just doing their job, and they're acting on what they're given. Now, you can certainly criticize their acting or whatever you think. You can do that. That's perfectly valid. But to attack somebody personally is bullshit. And I know it's not a lot of people. I know they're exaggerating on how many people are sending her messages and stuff, but she did share a few, and it's horrible stuff. So first of all, you have to obviously say this. Don't go after the actors. I mean, they're just doing the job they're hired to do. They're reading the scripts. They're learning the scripts that somebody else wrote, and that's the real problem with the story is the writing. But people do have a legitimate concern over her being the main antagonist over Darth fucking Vader. It's about Obi Wan Kenobi, and his central thing is he killed his friend, or so he thought, just about 10 years ago from this show, and he's still jaded over it, all that kind of stuff, and trying to find himself again, and that should be the central theme of the story. With all that said, they did make the third sister essentially the main antagonist. I'm totally fine with her having a backstory. All the Inquisitors have backstories. The Grand Inquisitor, was a temple guard, for example. And it looks like Riva will be one of the younglings that we saw in the beginning of episode 1. So she has some personal thing going on. But I don't think it's necessarily just directed at Obi-Wan. I think she's got a different plan in mind. Maybe there's a redemption arc coming, something like that. I feel that's the way they're going to go. And I have no problem with that in and of itself, but I do have a problem with it overshadowing Anakin. And that's the problem a lot of people have. So that's one thing for sure that I agree with, that, I'm fine with Riva. I don't necessarily love her character, but then again, I don't like the Grand Inquisitor in this show. He was absolutely horrible. He still has to be alive, otherwise they're going to break canon. He absolutely looks horrible. They could have gotten a different actor. Obviously, you can't make somebody look like a cartoon from Rebels, but he just doesn't have the look. I didn't like the way he carried himself. I didn't like some of the interaction between the Inquisitors. I thought that was really odd. I understand there's always a power struggle there. They're Sith wannabes. They're not Sith. They're never going to be. They're being used. Obviously, they all have a backstory, so I'm fine with that. It's actually really interesting. You have these individual Jedi that were captured and became Inquisitors because they were tortured and turned to the dark side and given just enough of dark side training, so to speak, to make them, bad enough or badass enough, I should say, to hunt Jedi. So that was the whole thing. So I have no problem with Riva having a backstory and all that kind of stuff, but it does overshadow Vader a little bit. We need more Anakin. And again, we do have 2 more episodes, so hopefully we'll get more Anakin and Obi-Wan. They're definitely going to see each other again. For people thinking that one quick fight scene was all they're going to do, that's just not the way it's going to be. I can tell you that right now. Next, let's talk about Leia, or Leia and Luke for that matter. People were complaining that, Obi-Wan's with Leia and all that kind of stuff. And while I agree this should not be the case for much longer than like maybe 1 episode, I think it was perfectly fine to kind of use her as a plot device to get him off the planet of Tatooine or whatever, kind of to start bringing him back to being the old Obi-Wan that we know and love. This was never about Luke Skywalker. I've seen so many videos now where, this is all about Leia and girl power and all that kind of stuff. There's no Luke. It was not about Luke. We were never going to really see a lot of Luke. I really don't know what a lot of people expected. Did we expect to see Obi-Wan just simply sitting on Tatooine staring at Luke through binoculars the whole time? I'm not sure why people expected that. This was never about Luke Skywalker. Yes, he's watching over Luke Skywalker, but a lot of people are complaining, why would he leave Tatooine? And again, in the comics and stuff, he does not do a lot of things. He stays there for the most part to keep an eye on Luke, but he also has to do other things. And I would argue that, not being on Tatooine is probably even better for Luke, because if they're searching for Jedi with the Inquisitors, and Riva particularly is all about Obi Wan Kenobi because she wants to get, in good with Vader or whatever, which I don't believe that's entirely true. But you would think if that's the case, that if they found out he was on Tatooine the entire time, that would put Luke in danger, because they would say, why is he here? And then they'll start researching into why he may be there, as opposed to just wandering around the galaxy or in a different location, whatever. So I don't know why people thought it was all supposed to be about Luke. We were never going to see a bunch of Luke just because we saw a shot of him as a kid in the trailer. But I will say it was a surprise to see Leia. It's surprising to see Leia to be such a big part of the story, because this really does break canon. It's fine, like I said, for a quick mission, maybe a plot device to get him back to his old self, leave the planet, whatever he's got to do. But now essentially canon is broken. Now, you can use some mental gymnastics, and this is all based off her line in A New Hope, of course, where she says, Obi Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope. You fought with my father, Bail Organa, in the Clone Wars. And by the way, this is only 8 years later from this show. 8 years from now, she will deliver that line in, canonical order. We all can infer from what she said that she never really knew Obi-Wan Kenobi. She just knew of Obi-Wan Kenobi from her father, Bail Organa. So that is a problem. And again, for that not to be breaking canon, you have to use some mental gymnastics based off what she said, because, if she had been running around with him only 8 years earlier as a little girl where he rescued her and they became really close, because obviously if she would have known Obi-Wan, like personally known him and had this close relationship, she would have said something in A New Hope like, Obi-Wan, you're my only hope. You helped my father in the Clone Wars that many years ago, and just not too many years ago, you helped me personally out of a sticky situation. She would have said something along those lines, but she didn't. And so this essentially breaks canon, and now we have to somehow go back and watch A New Hope and believe that not only did she ask for Ben Kenobi's help, you're my only hope type of thing because you fought with my father in the Clone Wars, but you also helped me. I remember us hanging out. We were really close once. I need you here on Alderaan, something to that effect. So this is one of those bad things that, Leia being in it is cute for a while, and, I have no problem with the actress. They're trying to kind of hint at her being force sensitive with the Riva mind probe and all that stuff, where she's able to resist it without any training and all that stuff. That kind of goes back to some of the Rey stuff and the sequel trilogy that I don't really count as canon. But it is a little much to have them know each other this well. So that is a problem. And I agree with that too, for the most part. The next big thing people have an issue with, I believe, is Obi-Wan kind of being, for lack of a better word, an old washed up loser. Now, I really don't have a problem with this, the way it's been portrayed so far, because you got to think about it. Just 10 years ago, he thought he killed his best friend. He thought he killed Anakin and left him on Mustafar. He did him dirty, honestly. Obi-Wan, I've always said this, Obi-Wan did him dirty. He didn't put him out of his misery. He just left him there burning in agony and pain and left him there, picked up his lightsaber and walked away and assumed he was dead. Okay? So he did him dirty, but he is jaded over this. He is still conflicted over this. This haunts him. It's just 10 years ago from the beginning of the show, and I have no problem with him being this way for a while to find himself again. We have to kind of peel back the layers of grief and all that kind of stuff and find that Obi-Wan that we all grew up loving to become the wise old Jedi who helps Luke out in A New Hope. So I have no problem with that being whatsoever, and I think you're kind of seeing that. Episode 4, while it was kind of a filler episode, they did have some good parts to it, and part of that was Obi-Wan kind of getting his groove back a little bit. So I have no problem with that. That's what this story should be about, is him. It's called Obi Wan Kenobi. It's not called Leia. It's not called Riva, any of that stuff. It's Obi Wan Kenobi. And I think that it's important to see him being down on himself and whatever, but a lot of things don't make sense, and we'll get to that in just a second. And I think lastly, the biggest problem, as far as the main things people have problems with, is obviously Vader and Anakin. Not enough of Vader or / Anakin, so far at least. Hopefully the last 2 episodes, we'll see more of this, and we're definitely going to see them meet each other again. That little fight scene was not the big fight scene. I didn't expect it to be a continuation of Revenge of the Sith. I don't know why people would think that. He's in total disbelief. He's been he's cut himself off from the Force. He sees this dark figure and realizes that he didn't put him out of his misery. This is his friend. He's still alive, and now he's become the worst thing possible. So he's going to be scared and running. He's not ready to face him yet. That's part of the character arc. That's part of the thing. So I don't have a problem with the conflict, both being conflicted. We're definitely going to see them face each other again in some way. I'm expecting that obviously in the finale, but we'll see. And the fire scene, I want to talk about the fire scene as well. I thought it was a really cool scene. I think most people actually enjoyed the scene where he lifts him up and drags him through the fire. The problem is he just let him leave. The way I took that was, obviously Vader could have put out the fire and snatched him over there with the Force and whatever, and the stormtroopers were still yelling, "I can't see," still trying to shoot through, so they were trying to get around apparently, although it wasn't really a big fire, so it was a dumb scene. But the way I took that was Anakin himself is still conflicted, and he always will be. He even admits this to Luke, and this is why I think we have to see them together again. If you remember in Return of the Jedi, when Luke turns himself in and talks to Vader going up to see the Emperor, he says to Luke, when Luke says basically, "Look, I know there's still good in you, whatever," then he says, "Obi-Wan once thought as you did.
Come with me."
Obi-Wan once thought as you do.
So we have to kind of get that information. What does that mean? So they're going to have another conversation. Now, whether it's a big fight scene, I don't know. Whether it's a little bit of both, probably. But we have to get that piece. So we're going to see more of Vader and Obi-Wan, I believe. And if we don't, that'll just be fucking stupid. Anyway, I just wanted to kind of mention like the main thing. So I thought, there's been some cool scenes. You see Vader with the rage. He was snapping people's necks. He was doing that to get a reaction from Obi-Wan. He wanted to sense his fear. But then, of course, he let him go, and people had a big problem with that. And I do understand the way it was done as far as how it was portrayed. He just let him go. All of a sudden, fire stopped him when he could have drug him all the way through the fire. He could have put it out. Ilaria Sand from Game of Thrones ran up and had to kind of save the day. And then the droid just picked him up and walked away while they all just kind of stood there. I get it was done terrible. That's part of the writing issue. We'll talk about it in just a second. But I do understand that Vader himself is, he watched him burn for a minute. And, of course, that's something we never knew either. Obi-Wan never mentioned in A New Hope or whatever that, I have these burns. But remember, Obi-Wan also didn't say a lot at all. He didn't tell Luke the entire truth. He basically lied to him from a certain point of view. So we have to remember there were some silly things in the original trilogy as well as the comics and stuff. A lot of people had an issue with Riva knowing that Anakin was Darth Vader. There's actually a good, fairly decent explanation for that. We'll see if they do explain that. I'm sure they will, because that's going to be part of her storyline. But people had a problem with her saying, yeah, you didn't know. He's still alive. Anakin Skywalker is still alive. And people had a big problem with that, because how would she know? Well, apparently she was probably that kid, one of the younglings in the episode 1, who heard Lord Vader being called out during the Jedi Purge in the Jedi Temple. That's fine. That's a perfectly valid way to explain that. But people have to remember, in the comic books, Obi-Wan didn't know either. He did know the name Darth Vader, but he also thought he killed him on Mustafar. In the comics, he literally finds out in a cantina. He's literally sitting in a bar, and a news thing comes up on a monitor and says, Darth Vader has won a victory on Kashyyyk. And that's how he finds out that Darth Vader, Anakin, is still alive. So I don't see how that's any better necessarily. People think that, I heard videos where people were saying, there's no way that, after 10 years of being on Tatooine and sitting there watching Luke, that he wouldn't know that Darth Vader was alive. Well, he didn't in the comics either. Just remember that. You're talking about, your beloved Canon and the old school days of writing, when writing seemed to be good in comics or books or whatever it may be. You obviously didn't read Dark Lord if you think that, or some of the comics, because there were some silly things too. It's not really that unbelievable that Obi-Wan, who cut himself off from the world and the Force, did not hear the name Darth Vader for 10 years. The Outer Rim is a place the Empire cares very little about. They have really no presence there, which is one of the reasons they took Luke there in the first place. And it's not unbelievable for him just to go to his routine job every day, cutting up meat from that dead crate dragon looking thing. I don't know exactly what the was. I wasn't paying attention, but the point being that he's just got this mundane routine. He buried his lightsabers, which again, there's some inconsistencies there. But the point being that it's not completely unbelievable that Obi-Wan would go that long and not hear the name Darth Vader. Because obviously, if he heard the name Darth Vader, he would know that's Anakin. He did hear that in the hologram at the end, or close to the end of Revenge of the Sith. So anyway, that's the major things I think that people have issues with in the show from what I've seen. I have seen, some complete breakdown rants on it. And, where people are saying, Vader would have never, he was on that base. He was on Fortress Inquisitorius. No, he wasn't. He was never there. He was there at the end. He showed up after the alarms went off because he was probably on Mustafar, which is in the same system. It's in the Mustafar system. He was not on that base. So there are things that people are just ranting about they're just wrong about. I won't say any names because I agree with a lot of these people. I don't want to call out any particular person. I do agree with a lot of these YouTubers. I heard people say that, Vader and Palpatine, Darth Sidious ruled the galaxy and they were all they knew everything and everybody. No, they didn't. They really didn't take a hands-on approach to ruling the galaxy. You have to remember, during this time, Vader was learning to get used to his suit. He hated it. He hated everything about it. He was in the back to tank all the time. He was trying to get out of that suit as much as possible. He couldn't move like he used to because he's missing all his damn limbs. It was a horrible, horrible time for him. He hated the Emperor for taking all that from him. He blames him as well. But they were not very hands-on. The regional governors were the Moffs and then the Grand Moffs, as we saw with Tarkin. But remember, this time there's still a Senate. He doesn't disband the Senate until A New Hope. They were not very hands-on with ruling the galaxy. They had to they had to grow in size and kind of maintain the illusion that they were all about, safety and order. So for people saying that Vader and Palpatine, for that matter, were very hands-on in ruling the galaxy was just not the truth until much, much later when they were the actual Empire. There was no more Senate. but they still didn't play. They were more about just finding Force-sensitive people in Jedi and making sure there was never a threat to them again. Because as we know, Palpatine's whole plan was to live forever, and that's when we saw, for example, I think the Jedi in the tomb on Inquisitorius, where we saw these dead Jedi they had captured or whatever and had in some kind of stasis or whatever, probably dead. That was probably the beginnings of Sidious doing experiments on him and stuff like that to figure out a host body for him or Snoke or whatever it was going to be. Really quick, let me go. I know this is getting really long, and I apologize. We're already at like 30 minutes, but I want to just get it all out. I wanted to make sure, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot I've missed as well. So a couple of the pros. I think this is okay. I think Obi Wan Kenobi does hit on some nostalgia, but we did have very high expectations after, especially The Mandalorian, because Disney has done some good stuff, like I said before. It's not all garbage, just a lot of it. But this show, very high expectations. You're talking about one of the main characters in Star Wars lore as far as Obi-Wan and Vader / Anakin. And if you really think about it, only the sequel trilogy was really terrible from Disney. You know, obviously The Last Jedi was complete trash. They tried to kind of save things and kind of save face a little bit in the Rise of Skywalker, but it just couldn't work because of what Ruin Johnson did to The Last Jedi. Was you just really couldn't bring it back from that. But it does have those nostalgia. It does have some good scenes. There are some good things about this show. It's just wildly inconsistent. I think the writing's sloppy. The lazy writing is really sloppy. Some things just make no sense. I mean, for example, Obi-Wan buried his lightsaber, and Anakin's that he picked up, by the way, remember, from Revenge of the Sith, and doesn't help the Jedi kid. And again, this comes from the comics. He did the same kind of stuff there. He didn't help people. He didn't want to bring any attention to himself because it was all about protecting Luke and all that kind of stuff. Because remember, Obi-Wan didn't really think about Leia in the same sense of being a Jedi. Because remember, Yoda had to say to Obi-Wan in Return of the Jedi, there is another if Luke happens to die. So his focus was never on Leia, which is, again, a problem with this show, being that it's all about him and Leia. Now, again, it's not just about him and Leia. This is just part of his growth and his of kind of caring again, you know, coming back to hope and like hoping that there's a future and there's a resistance forming. You can see the rebellion starting to form. So those are good aspects of the show in some sense. But the things that don't make sense like that, he buried his lightsaber. He doesn't help the Jedi kid, but yet he also insists that Luke must be trained when he's old enough to Uncle Owen. So you're saying the fight's lost and you're not really a Jedi anymore and you cut yourself off from the Force. You buried your lightsabers, but when Luke gets old enough, whatever that means, whatever that is, which is obviously ends up being kind of unplanned when he's 17 years old in New Hope, you're going to train him all of a sudden. So those kind of things. This last episode, these T-47s, otherwise known as Snowspeeders. By the way, just to throw this out there, they're not really Snowspeeders. They were modified to be Snowspeeders for that planet, for Hoth in particular, but they are just cargo ships. But they fly out of nowhere and save the day without any security. You're talking about Fortress Inquisitorius, which should have high security, and they just fly up and just kind of conveniently save the day. But again, that's happened in Star Wars before. People were complaining about how Obi-Wan snuck into Inquisitorius. Well, that happened with Cal Kestis in Fallen Order, the game. This came out last year, a year before, which is canon. He snuck into the same exact place in the same exact way, underwater. He did it by himself, though. He didn't even need the Imperial officer to help him. So this type of thing has happened before. He's in Inquisitorius, and instead of he took out that first stormtrooper. Instead of like putting the stormtrooper suit on and walking through there, he just walks through in this kind of Jedi robe. So there's a lot of little things like that don't make any sense. The escape, obviously, with Leia under his trench coat, and he's just got on an Imperial hat. I mean, I think it's fine to have an Imperial officer who's actually on the rebellious side to get in there and help him around, because that's the best way is, she's supposed to be there. She's an Imperial officer. I think that's fine. But the escape was a little cheesy. And then, of course, you have Riva, and she, tries to stop them or whatever. Vader comes in at the end after he's called again. He was not there. He did not sense Obi-Wan because he's not in the station. And sometimes they do have these sense of things across space and time or whatever, as we saw in the back-to-tank scene. But in this case, he was not there like he was on the Death Star, for example, when he felt his presence or whatever. So people were just saying that were just wrong. They made it clear that he was not there, but he's close in the Mustafar system. So he's on probably his castle in Mustafar. Anyway, the point being that he comes in there, he's about to kill Riva. He's pissed off. He slings her up in the air. He's force choking her. And he kind of like backs off and lets her speak, and she put a tracker on the ship. And it's like, okay, we've seen this before in Star Wars. Trackers are a very common thing in Star Wars, so I don't have a problem with that per se. But it's like you put a tracker just in case they escaped, even though you had them on the station and you didn't really plan for them to escape. But just in case you put a tracker in the little droid that Leia carries around, that begs the question, okay, did she want them to escape? Did she actually let them? Did she kind of go and talk to her to give them a chance to get out of there? So that brings up questions about what they're going to do with Riva. So I think there's something more to that. And on the surface, that is kind of dumb because Vader is not known for mercy. He kills Inquisitors all the time. He killed the second sister in the game because she failed. Any failure and you die, which is why they're always fighting amongst each other, trying to gain the upper hand, to be the one to please him, etc., because they know they are just as much prisoners as anybody else in the Empire. So anyway, guys, I've rambled on way too long. I just want to get this out there. I've had a couple people ask me if I'm going to talk about Obi-Wan. It's got some good, it's got some bad, but it's definitely got some sloppy writing and stuff that I would not expect from Star Wars people, especially Deborah Chow, who she does know the lore, she does know the canon. I'm just surprised that she would have writers in there that don't. And I guess I shouldn't be. Anyway, I know there's a lot I missed. I don't want to go over every single detail about how this was good or this was stupid. There's just a lot of good and bad throughout this series. I'm going to watch the final 2 episodes, and hopefully we'll get some kind of decent ending. There may be a season 2 I'm hearing now, so maybe there's more story to tell, or maybe they feel like they can't do enough in 6 episodes, which is what I thought in the first place. But hopefully we'll see more of Obi-Wan coming back to Obi-Wan that we get to know, as far as Ben Kenobi, the old wise Jedi Master who's still hopeful and still wants to fight. I'm sure we'll get to that point, and hopefully we'll see a lot more Vader, and the Riva stuff, the third sister stuff, won't overshadow Vader, although she's going to have a little backstory of her own, obviously. So there's some channels out here that I agree with most of what they're saying in most cases, because I was a part of the quote-unquote rebellion before there was a rebellion. I was the fandom menace before there was a fandom menace. I mean, I got old videos when Last Jedi came out, completely trashing it in my review of that movie. But I also think that there's also a market now for just being extremely outraged about everything. And if you've been around this channel long enough, on any of my reviews or shows or live streams, I try to approach everything from a common sense perspective and just put a little bit more thought into it instead of kind of reacting emotionally and just saying it's all trash and it's all garbage and whatever. I think there's definitely a market for that now. I don't understand why people who absolutely claim to hate everything about this show even watch it, but I also do understand why they do, because they have an audience to please and they have money to make on YouTube and content to put out. So I get it. It's fine. They're certainly entitled to their opinions like anyone, and if you love it, that's okay too. But again, it does break canon. It's pretty sloppy. It has some big issues. But we'll see what they do in the last 2 episodes. So anyway, please hit that like button, subscribe if you hadn't already. We are going to be around for Game of Thrones prequels, as far as House of the Dragon. We'll probably talk about Lord of the Rings, and we'll definitely keep talking about any Star Wars shows as well. So hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.